So today's so today's lecture is all about motivation. To have that conversation, though, to discuss motivation, we need to talk about quite a few things, actually. So we'll start talking about needs. We'll then move into motivation and discuss ability and opportunity as well and how they impact motivation. We'll discuss involvement, and then we'll finalize or wrap up the conversation talking about goals. So let's get started.
Needs. So I talked about this idea that the best way to kind of parse out the difference between needs and wants is that needs can be considered fundamental, such as hunger. It's hard to kind of let me start out by saying I think it's hard to parse those out. One way that researchers have tried to do that is by saying that needs are fundamental, such as hunger. If that's the case, then things like excitement and self confidence, which can be considered hedonic needs, are also fundamental. Wants, however, are a means of expressing a need. So you might be hungry, but you might want rice and curry or bread or noodles, right? And so that's the specific method of satisfying your hunger. You might have a need for excitement, but what that looks like for you might be different from me, right? So you might want to go to monster truck rallies, and I might want to go to a football game, these kind of things. Wants often, and always, I should say, actually is a better term, will depend on the individual's culture, their taste, their ability, their social status, their availability, and their circumstances. I cannot stress this enough. Wants depend so much on so many different things. And I'll give you two examples. Both involve African Americans. So the first is chicken. Actually, I'll use both chicken and watermelon. So chicken and watermelon are often associated with black people, and people will have this racist trope where they say that black people love chicken and watermelon. I remember driving home once from my PhD program, so from Arkansas to Kansas City, and there was a Caucasian guy on the radio, and he said he didn't understand the idea that black people love chicken and watermelon. Who doesn't love chicken and watermelon? I died laughing at that. I should note, though, my dad does not like chicken. He thinks it's gross. He doesn't like any form of poultry. Anyway, but where did this kind of idea come from? It came from Jim Crow era, really, well, actually, I should kind of back up. It came from slavery, actually, particularly right after slavery. So slavery is over. African Americans become sharecroppers. If they're lucky, they work the land. They don't own the land, but they work the land. And when they're working the land, there are a few things that happen. One, they start growing and selling and eating watermelon. Some people took that as a symbol of black people just loving watermelon. They just said, black people love watermelon. But it turns out that there are deeper reasons why black people liked watermelon. It was cheap. Other people would buy it, and not just other black people. Actually, lots of people would buy it. And so it was a way for black people to earn money. It was also a way for them to have some kind of a treat, right? They didn't have a lot of money for things like Snickers bars or candy and this kind of thing. And so having something sweet like watermelon was helpful. In terms of chicken, very similar. So you're quote unquote free, but traveling across the country in traveling in general, and wherever you go, right? Traveling in your city can be dangerous. Traveling across the country, even more so. And so, what black people knew is that chicken lasted a really long time. So you could fry chicken and keep it, in a purse or in a cooler or whatever for really long periods of time. And so some black people would use chicken and eat it for their lunch, right? They take it to wherever they were working. As their lunch, because it might be difficult to find a restaurant or a place where you could eat, right? There were specific places where you couldn't eat, actually many of them. Um, and if you were traveling, so like I traveled from Arkansas to Kansas City, Missouri, and I felt comfortable, but then you absolutely would not have felt comfortable, right? There were gas stations. Sure, you stay outside, but you wouldn't have felt comfortable trying to figure out where you could where you could eat at in new cities as you're on the road. And so black people often just took fried chicken with them to eat when they were on the road, so that they wouldn't have this dilemma. There were other things that they did, but these were kind of big things, and some of the reasons that people associate chicken with water and watermelon with African American culture. Um, just thought you should know that is an interesting example. We can talk about needs in a variety of different ways. And I'm going to talk about specific needs later. But when we talk about basic types of needs, we usually think of two different basic types of needs. The first, innate. These are your physiological or biogenic needs that are considered primary needs. Your need for water, your need for food, these very primary needs that we have. And then the other is what we call acquired or learned needs. Um, these are needs that come up in response to your culture or environment, right? They are generally psychological and considered secondary needs. You might need new jeans, you might need new kicks, so on and so forth. I thought a great example of this would be gaming, right? So gaming is an acquired need, and the gaming industry is growing like gangbusters. Look at this chart over here. If you consider 2013, where the gaming industry was worth 76.5 billion dollars, and in just what 6 years, in 2009, they're worth 151.9 billion dollars. So it's almost doubled, right? And I'm sure it's going to continue to grow, particularly since we're in a pandemic and a lot of people are looking for entertainment that they can do in their house. For example, I was thinking about getting a virtual no, I'm sorry, a VR, virtual reality machine. Text or not text, email me if you have one. I would love to know people's thoughts on these things. Anyway, the gaming industry is growing. This is an acquired or learned need, and a lot of gamers will use the word need, and I'm going to go ahead and use the word need too. But remember, needs and wants are almost indistinguishable now, right? Because if we're talking about actual needs, most people in America don't have actual or many actual needs, right? There are some people who need food, but we don't, or housing, but in general, most people have food and shelter, right? We don't have a lot of people dying of hunger in the US, for example. So the gaming industry, again, huge increase in terms of kind of the revenue that they are achieving here. So, oftentimes when we talk about needs, we often focus on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I think is important, right? Like this idea that we have physiological needs, safety needs, belongingness needs, ego needs, self actualization is our higher level needs. I think that Maslow starts us on a journey of figuring out kind of how we classify needs. But there are some criticisms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Some people say it's too simplistic, right? It's possible for the same product or activity or service to satisfy every need, right? So you don't have, I mean, it's possible that you could have a product that satisfies both your ego needs and your physiological needs, let's say. It's too culture bound, right? So this hierarchy of needs reflects more of Western culture than anything else. And then, of course, because it does reflect Western culture, um, it emphasizes individual needs over group needs, which, is not going to be something that shakes out fairly well in a lot of Asian or Eastern, excuse me, countries. And so I don't really focus on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but to say it's there, it makes a lot of sense, and there are some valid criticisms of it. High urgency versus low urgency motives, another kind of classification here. High urgency, you need to satisfy your need or want immediately, and you may do a little bit of comparison shopping, but not much. On the other hand, when it's low urgency needs or wants, you can postpone them, you can shop for the best product or the best price. An example that I came up with, and I'm sure you probably came up with it as well, would be face mask, right? So when the CDC started saying we should wear a face mask, and companies started saying don't come in here without a face mask. Getting a face mask was really urgent. Some of my friends were like, I'm going to sew my own. Only one of them did, and she only sewed one because it took too much time. I knew that I wasn't going to sew anything, and so I had this high urgency to figure out where I can get face masks. And so I think that this was like a mad scramble for a lot of us. So I've talked about needs before, but I'd like to talk about specific needs and how they relate to buying behavior. Some consumers may have a need for achievement. If so, they value personal accomplishment. People who fall under this spectrum will place a premium on products that signify success. So things like luxury brands or technology products, those kind of things, because they signify success. These consumers, the ones who need achievement, have a need for achievement, will gravitate towards those products. At the same time, some consumers have a need for affiliation. They absolutely want to be with other people, so those consumers will often kind of focus on products that are used in groups. So it could be alcoholic beverages, it could be sports bars, so on and so forth. Some consumers have a need for power, and that will often manifest itself out as the desire or need to control one's environment. So these consumers will often focus on products that allow them to have mastery over surroundings, right? So muscle cars, right? Loud boom boxes, maybe concealed weapons, so on and so forth. Some other consumers may have a need for uniqueness. So these consumers like to assert their individual identities as opposed to their social identities. They want to be known for their individual identity. And they enjoy products that focus on their unique character, whether it's perfume, whether it's clothing. It might be these very interesting looking Lego sneakers, so on and so forth. We also have safety and health needs. So, threats to our safety and our health will often motivate purchases for personal security and protection related products. Businesses will try to provide a variety of products and services to appeal to health and safety conscious consumers, right? So, an example of this would be Activia. So, Activia is a yogurt made by Dannon. They came out a few years ago and said that their product was clinically and scientifically proven to regulate digestion and boost immune systems. Turns out clinically and scientifically were untrue. Those were untrue claims, and they were ordered to pay out $45 million for making unsafe claims. But these aren't the only companies that kind of make false claims or the only companies that kind of focus on kind of this safety or health message as a way to sway consumers, right? For a short period of time, I worked for EDT, BDT. I can't remember the home alarm system company, and they had all kinds of ads to get consumers to purchase their products. All kinds of ads that threaten your safety and whatever else. We often have egoistic needs, so inwardly directed ego needs, right? We want to satisfy our ego, and so to do that, we might have a need for self acceptance, right? Which is, I think, is huge, and I think more people are pulling up on the self acceptance website, or not. Oh my God, I just said website. Sorry. Wagon is what I meant. More people are pulling up the self acceptance wagon. And that's why you see things like body positivity or acne positivity. I read an article the other day about an influencer who decided she was going to show her skin. And so now she is a part of the acne influencer group. Personal satisfaction with your job or a job well done, success, independence, self esteem, so and so. so on and so forth. We also might have outwardly directed ego needs. I shouldn't say might, we do have these needs: prestige, reputation, status, recognition from other people. This tends to be huge, and that's why when you work at companies, they are quick to do things like send out emails for someone who's done a good job, or give them these little rewards and yada, 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 because they know that for a lot of people, it kind of helps them with their egoistic needs. I should say that you should probably, although I'll give you a study guide, be sure to make sure you understand me when I say kind of, you know, when I explain current research. I like to put those type of questions on the test because I think it's important to incorporate current research and current literature. Another type of need is the need for love and companionship. We tend to be social creatures. We need to experience and express love and companionship. And then, that being said, some people tend to gravitate towards products and services that help individuals find and attract others for love. And companies often kind of will create campaigns to show that using their product is more associated with kind of being able to attract and obtain, others. We also often experience the need to give. Sometimes it's give something back to other people or reward ourselves. We like to call these self gifts, and research has shown that self gifts motivate us, they reward us, and they allow us to console ourselves. So, self gifting is actually a really important part of kind of consumer behavior, and frankly, the American psyche, and I would argue Western psyche. Consumers also have the need for info. That's one of the reasons we watch TV or we read. It fuels our internet usage. One thing to remember is that information plays an important role in persuasion, right? If an ad appears when a consumer needs information, they are more likely to pay attention than when they don't need the information, right? So let's say, you're pregnant and the ad comes on for diapers or Pampers or whatever, you're more likely to attend to the situation or the information than if you weren't pregnant and really didn't care about, diapers. But the need for info doesn't necessarily mean that we act on that information, right? So, um, last year, the total number of STD cases in America was about 110 million. New STD cases in America, 20 million, and half of that 20 million was fueled by people ages 15 to 24. Now, we can kind of have a conversation of why this might be the case, but I think certainly we could say that it's not because people don't know what STDs are and people don't know how to protect themselves from STDs. I feel like for a lot of people, that level of knowledge or knowledge about those two topics is pretty kind of well known. And if that's the case, people have knowledge about these topics and kind of these issues. The question becomes, why aren't people acting on these topics and this information? People also tend to have a need for financial security, or as we like to call it, financial well-being. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, says that financial security is a state of being wherein a person can fully meet current and ongoing financial obligations, so they can pay their bills, can feel secure in their future financial future, and is able to make choices that allow them to enjoy life. So, what does that mean? Uh, it means a few things. That means, in terms of security, the person has control over their day to day and month to month finances. In the present and in the future, they can absorb a financial shock. Now, that's important. In the future, you can absorb a financial shock. It also means, in terms of security, I'm sorry, not security, in terms of freedom of choice in the present, consumers who have financial security is that they have the freedom to make choices to enjoy life in the present, and in the future, they're on track to meet their financial goals. Now, I'm looking at this and I'm wondering how many people would actually say that they're financially secure given kind of these four elements of financial well being. And I don't have this as a think break, but I'll let you kind of think about what percentage of consumers you think are financial have financial security based on kind of these four elements. You might also have a need to possess things. So you might acquire products just because you need or want to own a product. You can think of people who are collectors. You can think of people who, get knickknacks around their house. Lots of people will fall under this category, or I should say, lots of buying behaviors would fall under this category, not people, buying behaviors. So, yeah. The need to possess does play a role in impulse buying. So, a consumer unexpectedly experiences a sudden and powerful urge to buy something immediately. And this is, again, down to or caused by the need to possess, right? So you could say a new product comes out and you feel compelled to buy it because, you know, impulse buying. We have social image needs, and oftentimes we see that played out in conspicuous consumption. So conspicuous consumption is your obtaining a product or acquiring a product so that you can display that product or service, I should say, um, to show off your status, right? So you are motivated to show people how successful you are. That could be monetarily successful. It could be, you own a pen collection and you want to show people that you've been really great about collecting pens. Um, I collect Barbies. I don't think I have this like desire for people to see the Barbies because I mainly keep them in my office. Anyway, companies often reinforce the notion that products enable you to communicate your social image, right? All the time. Um, and it's crazy. Sometimes they do it deliberately, sometimes they do it subtly. And I should note consumers do it as well. So there was this trend a few years ago where people would post pictures of themselves with Starbucks cups, right? And they always made sure to show the label as Starbucks because they wanted to reinforce the social image that they're cool and they're drinking expensive coffee. I mean, it got to the point where people were photoshopping the Starbucks logo on people's, Instagram or whatever. So they would have a white cup and they would just, Photoshop it, which sounds nuts, but that's what they do. And so remember, and I say this deliberately, that companies can reinforce this, but consumers can also reinforce the notion that products enable you to communicate your social image. So we also have a need for pleasure, and so we buy products, services, and we engage in other consumption activities to provide us with fun and excitement, right? And that makes sense to me. Lots of us do it. One thing, though, that we tend to do a lot is use social media. And some of the people who were instrumental in kind of creating social media have come out and said that social media is horrible for moods and attitudes and mental health. And we've seen a lot of research that backs this up. There have been a lot of studies, for example, that say that girls with depression spend more time on social media. And the question becomes, which came first? Is it that depressed girls spend a lot of times on social media as a way to forget about their life or alleviate kind of these sad feelings? Or is it that these same, or is it, I shouldn't say same, or is it that these girls are depressed because they spend so much time on social media, right? And it's a chicken and an egg situation. I would probably, off the top of my head, choose the latter, right? We see the same kind of effect here in this bar graph or bar chart. that you do see this increase for men. The curve is not as steep and it's not as consistent as it is with women. So girls who spend 5+ hours a week, about almost 40% of them say that they are depressed. And I think this is something that, again, needs more research, because you do want to find this chicken and egg. Although a study like this would be really hard, because you'd have to find people who've never used social media who might have depression, and a control group who's never used social media, and try to figure out what's going on. But in general, social media, a lot of people believe, is not good for mental health. That is the end of my lecture. I hope that you are having a great day or great several days, and I thank you for listening. So, motivation is defined as the process that initiates, guides, and maintains goal oriented behavior. It's a psychological process, right? So, a motive is the specific need or want, but motivation is a psychological process guiding that. So, motivation is what causes you to act in general. It involves the biological, emotional, social, cognitive, or thought related forces that activate behavior. So I'll tell you a story. This is one of my favorite stories to tell. When I was a freshman in college, after my freshman year, I got into a really bad car accident. The car accident caused me to need to take a semester off of school. Um, and I mentioned this before. I called Mizzou. They were really, really great about maintaining my scholarship. No worries there. My next call was to who at that time was one of my better friends. We went to Mizzou together. I would argue she's the reason I went to Mizzou, her pushing me to apply. Um, anyway, to tell her that, I was taking a semester off, and so unlike the original plan, there were five of us who were going to move in together. I wasn't going to be able to move in for at least a semester because I needed to take the semester off. Rather than providing any kind of sympathy or empathy, she was a complete jerk face, and gave me this spiel about how if I take this semester off, I was never going to go back to Mizzou. I was probably going to ruin my life and end up in Kansas City doing nothing, so on and so forth. I tell you what, nothing in life has ever motivated me like that conversation, right? So, towards the end of kind of my semester off, I was like, maybe I should stay in Kansas City, be closer to my family. But every time I had that thought, I was like, no, 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 I'm going back. I'm going back to prove her wrong. I know, petty, but it got good results, I guess. Yeah, so there's that. So I am going to talk briefly enough about some motivational theories. One thing to keep in mind with these theories is that we don't have a parsimonious theory of motivation, right? So each of these theories is true, but they don't explain all motivation, right? So they might explain some aspect of motivation, but it doesn't explain kind of why it's so hard for you to get out of bed on a Monday, or how, we can strive to make employees more efficient, or kind of get students to pay attention to class or even come to class. You want a motivational theory that can do all of those things. We don't have it yet, but what we do have, I guess I should say, are these motivational theories that describe some aspect of motivation. The first theory is the instinct theory. It is a pretty old theory, and it just basically says motivation comes from evolutionary programming, right? So, maybe women are more or less emotional, however you want to say that, because of evolutionary programming. And there's some evidence for this. I mean, I hate to be morbid, but you could look at, I tend to be interested in like serial killer shows and murder shows and stuff like this. And one of the things they talk about is that women will often choose indirect methods of killing someone, whereas men are pretty direct. This is also true about suicide, right? Men are more likely to die from suicide because they choose a very direct method of killing themselves. They'll shoot themselves. Whereas women are less likely to shoot themselves. They might cut themselves or overdose on pills. things like this. It doesn't work out. They get their stomach pumped, yada yada. They don't die. Similarly, women are more likely to use poison to kill someone or try something like poison, whereas men again are more direct. They're more likely to just shoot someone, and maybe that is evolutionary programming. Sorry, that was very morbid, but that was the example that came to mind. What can I say? Another motivational theory is the incentive theory. People are motivated to do things because of external rewards. And again, that does describe some things. Maybe you go above and beyond at your job because you get a bonus, or maybe you just even go to work because you get paid, right? How many people would not work if there was no paycheck attached? Drive theory says that there is this internal tension that people have that's caused by unmet needs. It causes this drive or motivation to get you to do something. Arousal theory of motivation, people take certain actions to either decrease or increase their levels of arousal. The humanistic theory, which Maslow's hierarchy of needs falls under, says that people have cognitive reasons to perform certain actions. You want to start and do all of these things until you get up to self actualization. And you are, again, cognitively thinking how you get there and what it takes to get there, so on and so forth. And last but not least, the expectancy theory of motivation. So behavior is pulled by expectations of achieving desirable outcomes rather than pushed from within. The problem, of course, with expectancy theory is that there are some motivations that are pushed from within, right? So you could say, taking care of your kids, right? So, I mean, I hate to say this, but like ultimately, let's be honest, some people have children because they say, "Oh, I want them to take care of me when I get older." But some people just have kids because, they want to have kids. Um, yeah, and specifically all the little actions that it takes to raise a child, changing diapers, doing all these things, and being really anxious if your kid cries. I would argue that some of that doesn't have this clear cut incentive, and yet we do it. I'm going to talk about motivation a bit more, and you can see some of these theories and some of the things I say, which is great, right? So, for example, in my next slide, I'll be talking about arousal, and you can look at, the arousal theory or think back to the arousal theory of motivation. So, motivational direction. So, as you know, most goals can be reached by a number of paths, right? If I have a goal to entertain myself tonight, I could watch some Thursday night football. I could get on my fantasy football team and see what's going on. Uh, I should say league and see what's going on. I could go out for drinks. The variety of things I can do. The objective of marketers then is to convince consumers that the alternative that they offer provides the best chance to obtain that or attain that goal. And so the NFL definitely wants me to watch Thursday night football or to get on the fantasy league and kind of participate that way. Bars and restaurants in the city definitely want me to decide that I want to go out to eat or go out for drinks. Um, Same is true everywhere, right? Other bars and restaurants in other parts of the city or other parts of other cities like Ferndale or Royal Oak might want me to come there, right? That's the goal of their marketing efforts to convince me that that's where I want to be and that being there can help me attain my goal of relieving any boredom that I might have this evening. Motivational strength refers to the degree to which a person is willing to expend energy to reach one goal as opposed to the other. And it all depends on the person to a certain extent and kind of what those goals are. I'll give you an example. I take my nieces and nephew out during the summer. And this last summer, I took them on vacation for a week. It was really nice. We did more of a staycation where we did a vacation in their own city. So I went down. I got a hotel room, and we stayed there for 7 days. And I took them to different places around town. But the thing is, I don't have kids. and kids are actually tough. I don't know if any of you have children, but it is kids are a lot of work. And you have to do a lot of things with kids that you wouldn't do by yourself, right? So for example, one of the things I always do with my nieces and nephew is take them to the movies. And I'll be honest, I don't really watch a lot of movies, particularly back, through the whole movie. I don't really have the attention span to do so. So, for example, if I were listening to this lecture, I would probably break it up into 30-minute chunks. Although I tend to be better with listening than I am with watching. But in general, I just don't have the attention span. Anyway, I go to the movies with them, and we always see a movie that's kid appropriate, right? Kid appropriate. Let me tell you what, if I'm going to the movies with anybody else and I have to use the restroom, I am like, let me hold it, right? If I am with my nieces and nephew and I have to use the restroom, I am jumping out of that seat so fast. Like, whoo, give me a 5-minute break. I just need a little bit of a break. And in fact, at one point, I took them to see the Emoji Movie when they lived in Kansas City, and I would argue, and actually, if you want to argue with me, feel free. I would argue the Emoji Movie is one of the top five, if not the worst movie I've ever seen. Top five, easily top five. Um, and I remember, I think I used the restroom like 3 times during that movie. Anyway, it was just horrible. It really was. So, when we think about motivational strength, we can think of two motivational theories or theories of motivation. One thing to remember about theories of motivation is that they are numerous. There are many, many theories of motivation. The other thing to remember about theories of motivation is that I don't think that theories are necessarily either or. I think that if you really want a true theory of motivation, it probably encompasses quite a few of the ideas in several different theories. On this slide, I'm going to talk about two that I think are important. The first, drive theory, suggests that our biological needs produce unpleasant states and that you need to reduce the tension of these unpleasant states. And so this drives you to or motivates you to do things. So, for example, if I'm at the movies and I'm on a date, I want to stay in the movie, right? I don't want to look like a person who's getting up 8 times during the movie. On the other hand, if I really have to use the restroom, or if I'm really thirsty, or if I'm really hungry, I am going to get up because I don't want to be hungry, thirsty, these type of things. And drive theory kind of explains that, right? By saying that we're motivated to reduce any kind of tension that's caused by these unpleasant states. Expectancy theory is a little different. So, expectancy theory actually encompasses kind of behavior, right? So it says that behavior rather than biological needs. So biological needs are very specific. You're hungry, you're thirsty, you're tired, right? You're fatigued, these kind of things. On the other hand, there are other things that motivate us that aren't necessarily biologic. For example, if you were the kid whose parents promised you money if you got good grades in school, you might make the attempt to get good grades in school to get that money. And expectancy theory would cover that. It says that behavior is pulled by expectations of achieving desirable outcomes. In this case, it would be getting a grade so you can get the money, right? These positive incentives rather than pushed from within. So you're not necessarily in this case getting good grades because you want to get good grades. You're getting good grades because you um, you want that desirable outcome of getting the extra money. I always use this as an example because when I was growing up, again, I was raised by a single mother. We absolutely were not given money for grades, and in fact my mom wanted me to do well in school, but she wasn't really super school focused. She was raised by farmers who were raised by sharecroppers in Mississippi, and the fact of the matter is that it just the goal was to finish high school and frankly get like a factory job, which I totally would have did. There were a couple of things that kind of got into mix of that. My mom herself worked at General Motors on the line. My dad retired from General Motors on the line. That was very normative. I say all that to say, regardless, that yeah, again, we didn't. I was raised by a single mom. I did not get things like money for getting good grades. But one thing my mom did give us money for is cleaning. So if I did any extra cleaning, my mom would make deals with me. Like, for example, if you mow the grass and you mow the front yard and the backyard, I'll give you $5. And so I would do that. So I actually did a lot of labor around extra labor around the house, which was super good for me because it allowed me to earn money. And uh, I'm sure I don't have to tell you this. If you've listened to me for the last few weeks, you probably know this. I can be a little lazy with the housework, and so cleaning was not my goal, but it did allow me to achieve money. And so, according to expectancy theory, the reason I cleaned it was for the money. Absolutely, absolutely true. Not any kind of deep desire to mow the yard. I actually don't like mowing grass. I hate how the grass comes back and hits you in the face from the lawnmower. Yeah. So anyway, motivational strength is a pretty important piece of the puzzle.